Hey everyone, and welcome back to Guy Aitchison's Reinventing the Tattoo Community, where tattooers, apprentices, collectors, and the curious are encouraged to join these live streams, real world events to share and inspire and ultimately create better art and tattoos together. We beam out nearly every day, and with your help, have evolved into a quality network of amazing live and on demand tattoo and art shows that have all been receiving rave reviews. You're currently watching the Sunday afternoon drawing session with me, Jason Leeser, which is hosted every Sunday at 1 p.m. Artists, feel free to zoom in by clicking on the link in the events area. You may be beaming in from YouTube or Facebook. Maybe you're listening to the podcast, but you can always get the latest event schedule and notifications at the official Reinventing the Tattoo community, found at both app stores, the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store, or directly at community.reinventingthetattoo.com. If this is working for you and you can hear us, please let us know in the comments in the chat. And please tag a friend who loves tattoos. All Reinventing the Tattoo Network shows and art jams, drawing groups, interviews, panels, webinars, all of it can be enjoyed on demand and found in the library as well as the YouTube and podcast channels. There are countless tattoo and art rabbit holes for you to dive into. Perfect for the front room of your studio or to entertain your tattoo clients. In fact, we're beaming out 4 channels 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. To access that, you can go to reinventing247.com. If you go there now, you can always enter to win a goodie bag, a Reinventing the Tattoo goodie bag, filled with Cheyenne cartridges, raw pigments, and all types of different samples, which are coming in weekly. We've got some weekly staple shows we always encourage people to attend, starting on Sundays at 1 p.m. with me, Jason Leeser, followed directly by the Tattoo Weekly. Actually, I think that got moved to Monday. Followed directly on Monday mornings with the Early Bird Drawing Group with Kier at 9 a.m. Monday mornings. That's directly followed by the Tattoo Weekly at 5 p.m. on Monday evenings. After that, on Tuesdays at 10 a.m., you have a live drawing group with a very good friend of mine and an incredibly talented artist, Ricardo Sertivant, where he goes over and talks about philosophy, art, different strategies in creating art, as well as different strategies in tattooing. Wednesdays at 12 noon, you have the Tattoo Now show with Gabe Ripley. Thursdays at 10 a.m., we have a subscriber exclusive drawing group with Kier. Oh, almost forgot to mention, Monday nights at 9 p.m., we have a subscriber exclusive drawing group with Guy Aitchison himself. I've been doing them for about a year now, a little over a year. And I have to say that you can see a noticeable improvement in the work that I'm doing. So always want to encourage people to attend that one. Thursdays at 10 a.m., we have the subscriber group with Kier, which is focused on fundamentals. Thursdays at 12 noon, we have the Tattoo Collecting Podcast with Fawn Baker and Jordan Rookus. Always a great time to tune into that. We do have a few upcoming live events that we would like to try to encourage people to attend as well, either in person or virtually, because we will be beaming out just about everything. February 5th and 6th, Reinventing the Tattoo will be live from the Red Tree Gallery and True Tube's headquarters in Columbus, Ohio, where there will be live art jams, some seminars. I know Bob Tyrell's lined up to do one of his black and gray seminars. We're going to have all kinds of live tattooing going on, all kinds of live drawing, live painting. It's going to be a really great time, and that's February 5th and 6th. April 11th through 14th, we have the Inspiring Tours in New Hampshire with Sean Barber and Nick Baxter, where they go through and they take a small select group of artists out with them to really focus on oil painting. It's a great time, absolutely fantastic, small, very personal way to go through and work with really awesome artists. If you go to http://Inspiring Tours now, you can get on the wait list for the next one, probably next year, maybe the fall, but definitely next year. May 20th through 22nd, 2022, Hell City, Columbus, Ohio, Reinventing the Tattoo will be live and there to do live convention coverage. June 3rd through 5th, Reinventing Tattoo will be up at the Deadly Tattoo Convention in Calgary, Canada, doing live convention coverage there as well. And if you have not seen the lineup for the Deadly Tattoo Convention, oh boy, it's going to be something special. July 8th through 10th, 2022, we have the Rock River Tattoo and Art Expo. That's coming up with a whole bunch of Reinventing the Tattoo track artists at an amazing venue, and it's going to be super convenient to get to from anywhere. July 29th through 31st, we have the Rubber City Tattoo Invitational in Akron, Ohio with Tony Urbanek. That, as you all probably know, is going to be absolutely incredible as well. At this point in time, I'd like to go through and thank some of our sponsors, the people that help us make this happen. Starting off with Inkjet Stencils. Inkjet Stencils, print stencils straight from your mobile computer, your mobile device, or your computer. Save your time, save your hands, save your apprentices' hands. Be more efficient and get that tiny little nitty-gritty detail that you really want to get in your stencils. There's nothing that is going to take your art to another level than being able to sit down and literally print a photograph on the skin. I've used them before, and they're absolutely incredible. And next we have Interstate Ink LA. Many of you may know Church from his awesome custom sneakers on Instagram. His studio is seeking resident and guest artists, all clean and sober. If you are an artist in recovery, looking for a supporting studio, or you know someone that needs one, please reach out to them on Instagram at Interstate Ink LA. Next, we have Raw Pigments, a tattoo company that's tapping into the source, rawpigments.co. These are all organic, vegan friendly, heavy metal free. They are absolutely incredible, and they have got some of the brightest colors I have ever seen. They go right into the skin, super easy to lay in, and they saturate super easily. Definitely give them a check at rawpigments.co. Next, we have worldtattooevents.com, the largest, most comprehensive resource for tattoo events worldwide. With everything being rescheduled like crazy due to COVID, things getting postponed and canceled and moved around, you need to stay on top of it if you want to go to these events. The best way to do that is with worldtattooevents.com. Next, we have D-Lies Pro, also known as Dermalize in the rest of the world. Protect your art. If you're still using cling wrap to wrap your tattoos after they're done, it's time to step your game up. Watch some videos of tattooers and see what it's about. Go take a look at them on YouTube and do a search for D-Lies Pro. As well, would like to give a very special thank you to Tattoo Now, technology for tattooers, the leading edge in SEO and professional development for tattooers of all levels, and they're now accepting new clients. If you're really trying to expand your reach and you're really trying to get clients in from other places, really trying to grow your online presence, and really trying to recruit some new clients that really want to get the stuff that you want to tattoo, take a look at Tattoo Now. That's what they're there for. That's what they do, and they are very good at it. And of course, I'd like to give a very special thank you and shout out to the founder and inspiration behind Reinventing the Tattoo, Guy Aitchison. You can find all of his stuff, including his Biomech Encyclopedia, his DVDs, his machines, custom coil machines, mind you, very limited run, collectible. Definitely going to want to pick those up if you're like me and you collect tattoo machines. He's got original oil paintings for sale and everything else. You can find him at tattooeducation.com and guyaitchison.com. Would also like to give a very special thank you and shout out to two of our affiliates, the Fireside Tattoo Network, hosted by Jake Meeks, and the Apprenticeship Diaries with Amy Nichols. For those of you that don't know about the Fireside Tattoo Network, you definitely want to go through and take a look at that. It's not going to teach you how to tattoo, but it will, if you're already tattooing, it will help you take your tattoos to a whole new level. Definitely take a look at the Fireside Tattoo Network. If you're still trying to get into the industry and you're still trying to get that apprenticeship that you've always dreamed of, listen to the Apprenticeship Diaries. There is some absolute gold information in there that is 100% invaluable if you ever wanted to get into this industry and you wanted to know what a tattoo apprenticeship was like. That's where you would go to find that information. So thank you very much for both of you. Please post positive reviews on the channel. It helps us get the word out. As well, we always ask that you like and subscribe if you're watching from YouTube or the podcasts or anything of that nature. Please go through, help us create more events like this so that we can go through and provide you with better content and the content that you really want. If you would like to host a Reinventing the Tattoo event, or you would like to become a sponsor in the community, please send an email to management@reinventingthetattoo.com. Okay, and let's get going for today. I'm not sure if we're going to have anyone popping in with us today, but today I thought I'd switch gears. I've been working analog for the past few weeks, and I'm actually going to go through and work a little bit more digitally today. I've got a couple of things I'm trying to get together, and I'm trying to, really just get on top of, because I've got a couple of conventions and shows coming up that I'm probably going to want to have that ready for. So I'm going to go through, wrong button. And let's just see some of these comments. Awesome. No. Okay, cool. And let's close that. And that's good. Cool. So let me pull up my my great pad of eye here. So I'm working on this little hammerhead shark. I was really inspired by a guy on Instagram, Sailor Bit, who's been working a lot with Philippe Lou. And he did this one hammerhead shark half sleeve that was really inspirational. So I thought I'd sit down and give it a go on my own. I did a couple of quick sketches and drafts last night, just trying to get it pretty refined. So today I'm just going to go through and I'm just refining things as I go, trying to figure out those curves and shapes, really trying to figure out where I want things to go. And I definitely want to give it some waves. So I'm going to create a new layer. Now, I always like to do my layers in different colors. I don't usually like to sketch too much in black. And the first thing I always like to do whenever I'm personally sketching waves is I like to lay down some big flow lines. Where do I want these waves to be coming from? Do I want to have one coming up here? Is this going to be one flow line, which could then branch out in the foreground? Maybe have like a little guy in the background over in this direction. But lately I've been going through and taking a little bit of a different approach. And I'm just trying to find where I want to have graduated movement, if that makes any sense. So typically speaking, what I would do is I would find intersecting angles, intersecting points of interest, and intersecting lines. So for example, if I've got the hammerhead shark here in the foreground coming around in this direction, ideally what I would usually do is I would be bringing this down and kind of bringing this from behind in front of it, which I may still very well end up doing. When I say graduated movements, what I'm actually talking about is finding curves that are in line and making them almost graduated. So starting smaller. So if I was starting with maybe waves or wind bars, I would start with one line there, maybe another line here, And then if we notice this shark's upper body is creating another graduated movement, so it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So in that case, if I wanted to follow that, then what I would probably do is throw some waves here, maybe throw this one in front, so in front of the tail. This one would probably end up going behind the tail. So we'd have that splashing over there. So we would have foreground, middle ground, which would end up being this shark's tail. And then this would be even more in the foreground. And then this would be in the background. So it would create the illusion that just by going from foreground, middle ground, and then coming back into the foreground and having some deeper background, it's really going to help you push that sense of depth, really help you to go through and just take a look at, all of the different levels that you can create as far as a sense of depth is concerned. I do, however, like the idea of bringing a couple of waves down this way. I think it really creates a better counterflow. But just using this as like a rough idea as far as my graduated movements and my graduated shapes. One way that I could do this in order to keep both is maybe starting this wave coming up around here. Maybe having that one crash in the foreground. I could even probably branch that off, pull another one up here if I really wanted to create some more dynamic movement, really show a little bit more positive flow. But I don't want to block out too much of that tail, so I'm probably not going to do that. I do want to leave a little bit of that tail visible, so I'll probably just bring this guy down. And I always like drawing and sketching in different colors. Right now I'm just using green, I don't know, there's something about its visibility that I just really like. And it helps me keep all of my different layers separated. So I know if I'm doing that one in green for the next one, maybe I'll do like a dark green. And right now I'm just trying to figure out some flows. Let's throw one guy here, one little wave guy coming out from back here. Knowing that part of this is going to end up being obscured, but that's okay. I'm not too worried about that. And then maybe have, if that's coming in that direction, can bring this down this way and curve this around. So it's still following in this general flow line, but it just makes a quick curve up. And then that can allow me to bring this down here. Now, I'm not too worried about these wave bars because these wave bars are going to be done in a very translucent way. So what I'm going to end up doing is doing a full rendering of the shark in value. And then I'm going to go through just as if I was tattooing. And I would wash over top of all of that coloring that I did with like a very light or a very medium gray wash, probably more so towards the light side. And what that's going to do is that's going to completely and totally wash out and wash down all of the color that I did. By doing that, it's going to help really create the effect that it's traveling behind this wave. Maybe I'll have one more crashing wave or flowing wave coming up in this direction. Just kind of showing some movement. Here. Take another kind of, since this is all going to be in the background, these are going to be silhouette waves. I always find that doing silhouette waves usually works the best when it's all the way in the background, just because if it's in the background, it's not going to be very light. If you're trying to really create a sense of depth and really pull some of the lighter tones in the shark forward, you definitely want these silhouette waves to be darker. It's weird when you're looking at an underwater environment, because when you're looking at a horizon in an underwater environment, it's actually the exact opposite of when you're looking at a horizon line when you're on land. On land, if you look at the horizon, as things recede towards that horizon, it really kind of gets a lot lighter and a lot more faint. Whereas if you're looking at the same horizon line, but it's underwater, that underwater horizon line is actually going to recede and get a bit darker. So for example, if you're looking at the top of, your water, and then you've got the sea floor, as you look towards where the junction of the top of the water and the sea floor is, that's what's going to end up getting darker. Sorry, just wanted to adjust my little picture in the corner there. So just always keep that in mind. And I've always found that to be like the weirdest thing about, when working with underwater scenes. Maybe I'll have, let's see here. Where do I want to take this? So if this is all going to be in the back, yeah, I'm not sure if hammerhead sharks honestly are very well known to breach the water, just like great whites. If you watch any kind of YouTube videos of great white sharks breaching, they generally tend to come up from the depths, and they'll like jump out of the water to catch their prey, almost as like a sneak attack, which is pretty cool if you ask me. But I don't think hammerheads do the same kind of attack. So it's not, we obviously wouldn't draw it in the same kind of way. Considering how small this tattoo is going to end up being, well, the design at least is going to end up being, I think I'm going to stick with a couple of bigger shapes, and just really try to maximize everything I have going on. I might actually even end up rotating this a little bit. So if no, definitely keep it more along those lines. Ideally, what I would like to do is have this formatted so that I could go through and lay it out as maybe an upper arm half sleeve. And just to give you an idea of what I'm thinking would be a really nice place to put this. These are all stamp brushes from Tattoo Smart, by the way, if you're wondering where I got all of these from. And these are great for rough layout. So ideally, what I would like to do, if I could find a client for this, and if anyone is interested in getting this tattooed on them, I will actually be up in Columbus, Ohio at the Red Tree event, and I am looking for someone to tattoo on Sunday. So if you are interested and you want to get maybe something a little bit more illustrative, maybe something Japanese oriented, by all means, please hit me up and let me know. You can see my Instagram in the upper right corner. Hit me up, let me know, we'll talk, and I'd be happy to get someone in. Yeah, maybe something like this. You know, kind of where it's wrapping around the front of the deltoid a little bit. Maybe bring that up a little bit further. You know, this way it's got the appropriate flow on the upper arm, but it still allows me enough creative freedom to go through and really maximize the waves and use some waves as not necessarily filler, but really, it's really going to allow me to get the flow that I want with the wave structures that I intend on putting in there. Actually, probably bring that up a little bit more. You know, so you can already see how this shark is laid out as more of an S curve, which is ideal for an area such as an upper arm. If it was going somewhere, say the front of a thigh, that would be a little bit of a different layout, and that would have a bit of a different flow to it. I always like the way that if you look at, you know, even the great masters, how they have, you know, lots of different diagonal movement. It creates a sense of motion in whatever painting or work of art they created. So I always try to incorporate as many diagonal lines as humanly possible. And it's weird, even just looking at this positioning of the shark itself. If we really look at it, we've got a lot of different visual lines that are created already. For example, we've got this guy here. That's a visual line. Here's a visual line. Here's a visual line. This creates a visual line. This creates a visual line in here as well. Here, coming around. This is going to create a visual line. These are all lines of interest, right? Parallel line here and here. This, or I would naturally take down that way. And if we really stretch it, we can see this one big arc here. We can see one big arc back here. And we can see another big arc here. You know, so we can really see the intersection of these arcs and these curves. And that's what's going to create most of our movement. Besides, hammerhead sharks are just really cool. Usually for drawing waves, once I have a better idea of where I want them to be, I'll end up going through. I've got this folder of inking, right? And it's got all types of different stuff. There's one that should be included with Procreate. It's called Marker. Yeah, that's going to be a little big. Marker is great for drawing waves, in my opinion, simply because it comes out very fast and it's very rough and very loose. And that's exactly what I want. Because I just want to draw a couple little bumps. I believe Andre Malcolm refers to this as the Sharpie method. Because if you were drawing analog by hand, you could achieve the same kind of concept using any kind of a graphic marker or a Sharpie. Even dry erase markers, if you're in a pinch, can work well for doing this. I mean, I've even used dry erase markers when drawing tattoos on. and it gives you that good rough kind of feeling as far as where are these waves going to be breaking, where are the fingers going to be coming off of it. So that way it takes a little bit more of the guesswork out of it and gives you a very kind of rough idea of where things might end up being. Definitely want to accent this and bring this flow down and around. And if we've got that coming through, that we can always kind of branch off. And let's throw another one of these, only with a little bit more of an arc down here. Yeah, I remember back when I was first coming up in the industry, Japanese waves, as simplistic as they are, always used to mesmerize me because every time I tried to draw them, they would never turn out the way that I was thinking they would. So I used to sit down every day with a sketchbook and a pencil, usually like an architect's pencil with the 2mm lead and the little sharpener on the back, just because I never knew where I would be when I would have a couple of minutes to sketch. So I would carry one of those around with me, and I would sit down every chance I got, and I would just stare at waves and sketch and sketch and sketch and try to figure out, okay, well, how many different breaks are there in the fingers of these waves, right? Because each artist that draws Japanese waves, it's almost like they have a fingerprint on it, and you can tell just by looking at any artist, like, oh, those are Andre Malcolm waves. Oh, those are James Tex waves. Oh, Rich Wren drew those waves. Oh, those waves were drawn by Jason Leeser. And you can tell because they have a very distinctive, very unique kind of flow and feel. Certain people like to put a bit more energy and a bit more movement behind their arcs and the size of the fingers coming off of them. Some people like to have a bit more of almost a subtle rolling kind of curve to them. And by that, what I mean is, if I were to sit down and say, instead of doing these long finger licks coming off, that's going to be a lot of very big energy, because if you think about water splashing against a rock and it's really got a lot of force in that water, it's going to create a very large spray back and a very large bounce back movement. Whereas if I were to go through and, do just a whole bunch of super tiny little smaller waves coming off of it, it's going to give it by nature a bit of a softer, more rolling kind of effect. Maybe I'll do 2 or 3 layers of these. And you can tell just by looking at it immediately that it's not going to have quite as much motion. It's not going to have quite as much energy as denoted by those very long kind of bounce back wave fingers, if that makes any sense at all. The longer these protrude and the longer and thinner they are, the more energy that wave has to have in order to carry that water that kind of a distance. And that just comes from over the holidays. I was actually out at the beach visiting my parents. They live in Florida. So yes, during the holiday season, I was actually sitting on the beach, drinking a margarita and just staring at the waves, how the waves would roll and crash, and how they would break in certain areas over other areas, how they would just barely be cresting in certain areas and then just kind of die down. So it was fascinating to me to just have a few minutes to sit and study that. And I learned a lot when I did that. I learned a lot about, having or seeing these really big, powerful waves and the amount of power that they had behind those and how hard they would hit and how much of a splash they would create. And then you would see some of the smaller waves that would break in a more gentle form and how it almost just looked like a little bit of a trickle coming over the top. So if you really want to show a lot of very strong force in your waves and you really want to show a lot of very strong movements, make your finger waves and the fingers coming off of those waves and that spray back, make that very long, very thin, and you'll see just by looking at that how much more momentum and force those waves tend to take on. I always find that, as I mentioned before, I always like to go through and try to draw my directional lines first, just so that way I know I've got a decent flow going on. So if I'm going to have that guy coming up there, and these are all just very rough directional lines. These are not going to denote how powerful this wave is going to be. And I think I'm going to keep these a little bit smaller just so I can get more of that body of the shark in there. But the reason why I tend to sketch out these motion lines and these wave flow lines first is just so that I know that they'll all have the right flow and they'll connect in the right spot. For example, if this is the back side of my wave, I now know that I need to have something curling back to show this kind of a movement. So I need to have a place where these waves originate. So that's going to tell me that this is going to be a little too much. This is going to be a little too much. It's going to be a little bit too sharp of an angle. So now I'm just going to change this around. Maybe add one little guy at the top. Yeah. It's a cool little dude. Maybe we'll have a little bit more coming off of here. There we go. So now I can go back up here, switch back over to my purple. And I just kind of like, whenever I'm drawing these rough motions for these waves, for this Sharpie method, I always just like to vary it and like kind of jitter my hand back in almost like a looping fashion. What that's going to do is create tiny little points, tiny little bumps and ridges. And I'm going to use these little bumps and ridges to go through. And that's going to tell me where I want to have more of like a small subtle break in these waves to kind of show a little bit more movement. Now, I'm not going to use all of them. But it is going to give me a good idea. Just so that I know what's going to go where. And I've got a rough idea of, how much movement am I going to give this thing? How much energy do I want it to have? Is it going to have a rough idea, a rough aesthetic that I'm going for? Then I'll bring this around. Some are going to have 2 parts. Some are going to have 3 parts. Some may only have one tiny little offshoot. I always like to try to vary the size and the rhythm in it, because it's that variation in size and rhythm that's ultimately going to really give it more of almost a natural kind of a look and feel. And that, I believe, was the intention and the idea behind the great woodblock print masters that were depicting things like Hokusai and the Great Wave. They really wanted to try to capture the motion of the water in almost a naturalistic fashion. At least that's what I'm assuming based on what art historians have said. However, I'm not a big fan of art historians. So any of you out there that might be art historians, I'm sorry. But it is what it is. I just had some very bad experiences with art history in school. It's all memorization. And I'm not a big fan of memorizing things. So. And I still think that's going to be a bit much on the back side of this area. So what I'm going to do is erase all of this. And let's go back to our drawing board. People often ask me, why they don't see me freehand a whole bunch of stuff. And that's because I will literally do this exact same process. But if I'm freehanding something, I'm doing the exact same process on skin. So it generally takes me a lot longer. And in my opinion, time is money. So I want to try to be the most efficient when I'm, in the studio as humanly possible. And if that means that I have to stay up until 2 or 3 in the morning, to get assignments done and drawings done so that I can do this and maximize my time in the studio, I will. That's just one of my own personal philosophies of what I like to do and how I like to do it. Other people are far more efficient and far faster at freehanding things on, and that's awesome. That's absolutely amazing, and I envy those people. But I have a very bad habit of second guessing myself and asking myself, does this really look right? Could I have drawn this better? And because I tend to second guess myself a lot in that manner, it makes more sense for me to go through and draw a couple of different versions of it before I ever set foot in the studio to actually tattoo it. You'll notice I just decreased the size of my brush there. The reason why is because I noticed I wasn't getting too many of these little points coming out. And much like if you're drawing a hand, I always try to keep the top sides of these finger waves pretty smooth. Because you really can, if you really use your imagination, you can look closely and understand why they call them finger waves. And that's because when you're drawing them, you would draw them very similar to, drawing an actual human hand. Maybe not as far as like shapes and like layouts, you know, going through, marking things off, creating the slight curve, understanding where the thumb is protruding, you know, getting the right curve of fingers so that you know which one's tapered down. You know, you're not going to be so dramatic about it. A lot of it's going to be a lot more flowing and a lot more of just free hand movement. And the reason why is because you're drawing something in nature, right? Nature doesn't really work. Well, I mean, I guess the argument could be made that hands are naturally occurring because they occur on people. So those come from nature too, but you guys know what I'm talking about. Maybe I'll throw one more guy up there. I'll make it nice and busy. So once I've got that layer done, I'm going to go back through, and this is where things get really interesting. Let's go with from here. All I'm doing is I'm taking these and I'm just kind of plotting out where all of these little bumps and ridges are coming from. So here's a bump. Here's a bump. Here's a bump. Bump. You know, I find that if I have anything like here, let me bring this down a bit more. So if I have a bump like this on the bottom, what I generally want to do is bring this back over the top and create another little bump as well. You know, whereas it's kind of optional if you have a smooth underside to this wave. But I always find that if I try to match it, it looks a lot more cohesive and a lot better. And it really looks like it flows a little bit better as well. Now, this is a very common mistake I see when a lot of people draw waves is they'll make certain areas too thin, right? Like this area here, way too thin. So what I'm actually going to do is go back through and make sure that this, as it comes down, is going to be thick enough widthwise here and here to support this other area. And the way that I know that it's going to be thick enough to support it is because I don't want anything in the rest of it to be thicker, like this is thicker than here. than where it's coming out from the base of the water. For example, I'm going to go back through this. No good. This is good. This is good. This, I'd probably erase it right about there. But it's a very common mistake that I see a lot of people making when they're drawing water. And if you're trying to draw it in more of a traditional style that makes, and I hate to put it this way, but if it, in order to draw it so that it makes sense, sometimes you need to go back through and revisit what logically is going to make the most sense, as far as like physics are concerned. Right. So if I make that bigger, well, I don't necessarily want to make that bigger. I want to make that a little bit smaller. Let's come off of there. And granted, yes, there are plenty of people out there that are probably going to debate me on that as far as like the width thing and the base of it and all that stuff. And that's fine. That's totally open for debate. That's just one of the things that I personally like to do. You know, I find that if you look at a lot of the extremely well drawn waves, you'll notice that they have that kind of a base in reality, you know, where certain structures are going to be more supportive logically. Because if we look at our mind, right, our mind isn't going to make sense of something that's built like this as far as like waves, maybe one small guy here. It's not going to make sense to us because we know that as waves crash, they start from something larger and then they go smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as the spray and as that wave crashes, because there's less and less material, less and less water that's actually crashing. That's what our minds make sense of. So if we have it in the opposite direction, it's not really, you can't really get water from nothing. So it's not like you can start super thin and then just have this big spray, because that's going to be too much material here and not enough down here. Logically, it just doesn't really make sense unless it's going to be super, super, super translucent and super thinned out. But for a general rule of thumb, I always try to make sure that everything's got at least some of the appropriate weight to it. Now here, I always like to throw a curl back just to bring this out and show a bit more flow and really bring it around. And what this is going to do is bring the eye up and around so that as the eye views it, it's going to see this, and then it's really going to be brought up and out this direction. The eye is going to move in this way, and then it's immediately going to continue moving in that kind of a direction because of all of this. But as this gets smaller and smaller and smaller, that's going to tell our brain that this wave is really crashing out. It's all psychology. That's all it is. You know, and if you analyze the way that we look at things, if we look at very large shapes and then we see that large shape break down into smaller shapes and smaller angles and smaller lines, it's going to create a very natural effect that this is moving in this direction and this is breaking apart into all of these different things. Because we've got a very strong, bold, open shape here that's now being broken apart into all of these tiny little itty bitty shapes. So what that does is that forces our mind to understand it in a logical way. Now I'm going to do all of this again here. And I know I'm not the best at explaining things sometimes. So by all means, if anyone ever has any questions, if anyone ever has any comments or has any agreements or disagreements, please, by all means, pop into the chat. Let me know. Let me know if you guys can still hear me, because I'm not on the other end of this and I can't tell. But this is just, something that I found to be very important. That's been very helpful in the work that I've created. So I thought I would share that with you guys today while working on a project that hopefully I get to tattoo on someone coming up. As I mentioned before, this one's going to have a lot more smaller little finger curls. And that's because I really want to show a little bit more of a soft side to this wave. Where maybe it doesn't have quite the dynamic energy that this other guy over here does. And you can tell already just by looking at, all of the tiny little curls as opposed to some of these bigger, longer ones, how tight these are together. You can almost tell that it's going to be a little bit more of a gentle wave. It's not going to be a wave of tsunami proportions. Any questions so far? Oh, thank you. No? Okay, well, I'll probably sketch on this for another couple of minutes and see if anyone's got any questions. Unfortunately, I am then going to have to run, as I have quite a few things on my plate for today, including working on that big 3-foot by 6-foot commission painting that I was asked to do for someone last spring, and I just now I'm getting around to it. But that's unfortunately the way that life goes sometimes. Life doesn't always, give you a definitive timeline and allow you to stick to your own timeline. So sometimes you just got to roll with it. Now I'm going to stop and I'm going to look and I'm going to check, and I see a couple of little areas that are kind of in violation of what I was originally talking about, like here. Gotta go. This, no good. So what I have to do now is decide, do I want to bring more up at the top and down, or do I want to make this smaller or bigger, a bigger space? So if I bring that around, that might work. Also, don't be afraid, if you're drawing Japanese waves, don't be afraid to overlap. And by overlap, this is what I'm talking about. If you have an area where it just doesn't look like it's going to fit properly into the way that you normally do things, one way that you can create a sense of depth and dimension in your Japanese waves is by using overlap. For example, here, this is going to have a very sharp, abrupt stop. Very sharp, abrupt stop. And you'll notice that this comes down and curls over top. What that does is that automatically tells your mind that this part here is moving backwards in space, and this part here is coming forwards in space. Now, theoretically, I could do that here. I already did that there. I could do that here if I wanted to, and then just bring that over like that. And that could create a very nice three-dimensional look. Even here, if I wanted to, I could bring this down and around, and that could create this very tiered kind of crashing wave effect. Whereas this one's moving backwards in space, and you can tell because the only overlap is here. This one could have a very different movement, and I could actually be bringing it forward as far as my dimension goes and my actual flow. So depending on where these overlaps are is going to kind of depend on if it's moving towards you, if this part of the cresting wave is moving towards you, or if it's moving away from you. Anytime you have something coming down in front, it'll be moving towards you. Anytime you have it simply overlapping in this manner, it's going to be moving away. Now, obviously, if this image was reversed, it'd be a little bit different, but it's the same basic premise all the way through. By utilizing overlap, you can give your waves a lot more dimension, a lot more rhythm, and a lot more flow. And you can really, really make them look cool. Really get them to fit the movement that you desire. So I can say that I'm not super happy with this area. So I'll probably go back through and work on that a little bit more. But just to give you an idea of the different types of waves, you can see many, many fingers, giving it a little bit of more of a gentle feeling. Not quite as many, but a bit longer and a bit bigger fingers, creating a lot more motion and a lot more energy. So, yeah. As always, if anyone ever has any questions or if anyone ever has anything that they would like to see any of us reinventing the tattoo people go over, by all means, please feel free to reach out to us, drop us an email. You can shoot me a message, a DM on Instagram at Philly Inc. You can always email management at Reinventing the Tattoo as well if you have any ideas or if you'd like to host your own show. Otherwise, thank you very much for tuning in today. and take care. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend. And hopefully I get to see you guys back here again next week. So thank you very much for tuning in. Take care and cheers.